Kira is a mysterious being. The public doesn't know if the entity smiting criminals is indeed godly or simply human. All they know is that he possesses supernatural power and kills as he chooses. This is also all that's known about Kira to the various governments that make up the world. If such a criminal was turned in, what do you think would happen? Would he be quietly and summarily executed for the danger he represents? Would he receive a fair trial to be sensationalized and turned into a celebrity for the rest of his presumably natural life? How many breakout attempts would be staged in Kira's name? How many people would die in those attempts? Would Kira potentially be able to bargain for the favor of those in charge of the decision of what to do with a caged god? The power to kill whoever you wish with the right information is alluring, and would appeal to plenty of shady, powerful figures. If you were part of the team who found Kira, would you give him that chance? Before anyone gets a say, a captured Kira's fate rests in the hands of the investigators who found him. What matters more than proof is the opinions of each individual on that team. If they're all convinced that their suspect is Kira, a quiet execution is justifiable. Death Note is often seen as a battle between L and Kira. If you zoom out far enough, you can definitely make the argument for that interpretation. However, the consequences of the side characters of this anime should not be understated, as their influence often decides the outcomes of the skirmishes between these opposing forces.
Matsuda's acting stupid again.
Well, that is his specialty.
I can hear you, you know.
Matsuda genuinely wants to catch Kira, so he completely sides with L in his battle. However, he's also Light's friend, so he defends him vehemently. He's naive enough to readily accept everything Light tells him, so he wholeheartedly believes that Light isn't Kira. When he was finally convinced that Light was Kira, it was clear that he was beaten. Matsuda both helps and hurts the investigation. Matsuda's acting skills were good enough to turn his blunder into the opportunity for a plan that allowed Kira's capture. But Matsuda was the first one to eagerly point out that the 13-day rule exonerated Light and Misa. Matsuda suggests that Light should act as L. Matsuda, in a way, opposes both L and Light through supporting them both. Matsuda is always the character to share pro-Kira thoughts with the group, because everyone else's resolve is too strong to let those doubts creep in, or they're unwilling to admit them aloud. But Matsuda shares his thoughts with his peers bravely, but tentatively and correctly expecting their backlash, and every time we get to have light philosophical discourse. Sometimes Light even joins in to defend himself. The snake. Matsuda obviously disliked Nier. It was mostly because he considered Light a good friend and always stuck by his side, and after Light's name was finally cleared, Nier blatantly started trying to incriminate him again. Matsuda was annoyed by Nier's attitude, and once all of his suspicions pointed towards Light, Matsuda began to dislike Nier as a person. This was all to bolster the moment when Matsuda finally forsakes Light, siding with Nier along with the rest of the task force as they collectively cornered Kira. Matsuda gives his friend a chance to explain himself. Matsuda has always entertained the possibility that Kira could be good, but if Kira was good, how could he lead his own father, a good man, to his death? When Light gives the wrong answer, Matsuda only gets angrier, but he suppresses his wrath to give Light a chance to surrender. Despite their differences, Matsuda saves Nier's life not once, but twice. Matsuda honestly wanted to believe in Light more than anyone else on the task force. Part of it was probably that he couldn't picture Kira being so likable. However, when he saw how twisted Kira's face truly was, he realized that Light wasn't the good guy. Every member of the task force is against Kira. Matsuda didn't really contribute much to the Kira case specifically, but as a character, he contributed a hell of a lot to the show.
I found myself thinking before that some people would be better off dead. But still, that doesn't mean we're gonna go out and kill people.
Don't kill him! He has to die!
Matsuda's ability as a crack shot was introduced in this scene where he defends Chief Yagami's life from a mafia goon trying to steal the Death Note, foreshadowing the final scene where he defends Chief Yagami's honor from his evil seed. Okay, this is just self-indulgence at this point, but I'd like to discuss Matsuda's theories at the end of the Death Note manga. For those unaware, Matsuda came up with two theories after Light died about the Kira case, that Ide basically completely dismisses. The first of these is that Nier actually used the Death Note to control Mikami on the day of his encounter with Kira in the warehouse. The reasoning is that Mikami died shortly after the Kira case was closed and Mikami's actions were unlike him. Specifically, it was the fact that he didn't test the notebook before arriving at the warehouse and his unusual lack of composure at the meeting that people call into question. After all, Mikami was supposed to be an intelligent, functioning member of society like Light Yagami, but here he is making dumb mistakes and acting like a maniac. People explain this by saying that Nier wrote that Mikami would go insane and kill himself after Kira lost. Personally, I've never liked this theory, or any theory about Nier cheating by using the Death Note to win. Nier explicitly stated that he wouldn't just take the easy route and kill Kira. Nier wanted to win fairly. Ide also makes a good point about how much Nier admonished the Death Note. I don't think he'd be willing to use it if he didn't have to do so. I believe Mikumi's actions weren't necessarily difficult to explain. After all, it was clear he had a difficult childhood. As a teenager, he judged that his mother should be eliminated because she opposed justice. This guy has clearly been unhinged for a long time. When you factor in that the Death Note drives its users mad with power, his breakdown makes even more sense. Consider how early into his career Light showed this kind of unbalanced behavior. All it took was L saying hi and he was thrown completely off his rocker, not to mention how excited he got on his final day alive. Like Light, Mikumi just couldn't hold it in anymore. As far as his death, presumably through suicide, I think that's explained by the fact that he halved his lifespan to receive the Shinigami Eyes and became depressed after seeing Light fall from grace. Ryuk himself said that users of the Death Note will experience unique despair. You know, the kind of despair that Nier never experiences. I don't think this series of events is unlikely enough to convict Nier in the court of public opinion just yet. The second theory is that Nier was using Lidner as a triple agent, because she was giving information to Mello. Considering that the information she leaked caused Mello to act, and that Mello's actions revealed a crucial detail in the case, Matsuda assumes that Nier planned all of this and manipulated Mello into acting in a way that would benefit his investigation. Honestly, I think this one is partially true, but I think Nier just wanted to cooperate with Mello. Matsuda suggested this because he thought Nier wanted to use him to gain some more information before deciding to meet Kira, and that if he didn't learn anything, he would have just waited a little longer. He suggested Nier was being reckless with life, just like Kira, to make Ide dislike Nier. But Light himself suggested that Nier wouldn't change the date of their meeting because Mikumi would realize that the notebook was fake when he reached the 28th and none of his victims were punished. Mikumi would be able to tell they were alive just from seeing their picture. I do think there's one thing casting doubt upon both these theories. They're coming from Matsuda. Let's face it, the guy isn't known for seeing through masterful plots. Ide even points out that Matsuda is just upset because he liked Light and Nier beat him. That's why I think it's so funny when these particular theories are adopted by Nier haters. Like, those are Matsuda theories.
Matsuda, you idiot.
Outside of L and Light, Chief Soichiro Yagami is the most competent investigator of the group. He rarely acts alone, but was capable of recognizing an unprecedented Kira power and coming up with a countermeasure to avoid it, even if he had to leave his hospital bed to do so. And even in a rage, he was cool-headed enough to prioritize obtaining evidence against Kira and bringing it back to L all by himself. Because of his familial connection to Light and his leadership position in the group, most of Light's relationships with other characters are refracted through his relationship with his father. All of the task force's interactions hinge on their respect for Chief Yagami, whose actions are determined by his desire to bring Kira to justice and his desire to see Light as a good son that he raised properly. The other members of the task force know Soichiro to be a good man, and want to believe that he raised a good son. This is even true of L to some extent. Light knowingly takes advantage of this good faith and manipulates his father to make himself look better in front of the rest of the group. He knows that his father will instinctively defend him first, no matter what. That said, his devotion to the Kira case is unwavering, in part because of, not despite, his willingness to believe that Light is not Kira. He wants to find Kira to prove that it isn't Light. Unfortunately, this means he's looking in all the wrong places. Even before Light joins the task force, he uses his father as a weapon against L. He gets information on the Kira case through his father, and uses that information to manipulate the investigation team and build distrust between L and the NPA. It all goes according to Keikaku, of course, and a team of Kira investigators drops from a room full of veteran detectives down to like 6. However, by inviting the remaining task force members to meet with him, L solves all of his problems at once. They feel as though they've earned L's trust and begin to trust in him because they've seen his face. Information can't be leaked anymore because taking notes of any kind is prohibited. This move would also allow L to draw Kira in, since he knew that revealing his identity as L for the first time would attract the same brazen Kira that left notes directly for the investigators and killed a dozen FBI agents to send a message. But L and his new team don't see eye to eye. This idea is first alluded to when certain members of the task force balk at merely being told to use fake IDs to hide their real names, despite knowing that Kira needs a name to kill. Then again in episode 8, Aizawa yells at L for suggesting that they use hidden cameras and wiretaps to surveil their prime suspects. In both of these cases, Chief Yagami, the authority figure of the cop collection, defends L, understanding that the Kira case was an unusual one which called for drastic measures. Even after the chief gives permission though, Aizawa and Matsuda continue to push back against L's plan. They're thinking of their duty as police officers to obey and uphold the law, and Soichiro's duty as a father to protect his family from perverts before their duty to stop Kira. The chief starts off as L's best ally, and only begins to turn against him when L begins to suspect Light. As L grows closer and closer to the correct answer, the wedge between him and Soichiro grows.
I refuse to believe that my son could turn out to be Kira.
The opinion of every last member of the task force counts. If L doesn't win the task force's loyalty, Kira will use them to kill him. When Light surrenders himself to imprisonment for the investigation, he uses his connection to his father to reframe it as an unfortunate act of martyrdom. None of the task force members really want to go through with it. He knows that they'll be anxious to clear his name once the third Kira, whom I'll dub Yotsuba Kira, or Y Kira for short, starts killing again, and that L will still be suspicious of him. While L is trying to discern whether or not Light actually is Kira, Light counts on his tension becoming his get-out-of-jail-free card. Unexpectedly, Chief Yagami offers to be detained as well, because he so strongly desires to protect Light that he fears that he may interfere with the investigation. As worry and stress cause his health to deteriorate while the rest of the task force can monitor him, tension rises. Eventually, the emergence of Y Kira forces L to release Light as planned. Aizawa is actually the member that most vehemently advocates for Light's release, eager to allow the Chief's return. Aizawa twists L's arm and Light is released, but Kira lies dormant within him. Obviously unintentionally, the task force members' actions do facilitate Kira's plans to have L killed. Earlier in the series, Chief Soichiro was willing to accept investigating by any means necessary, even if it meant breaking the rules, given the importance of the Kira case. In the Yotsuba arc, he reveals that he draws the line at sacrificing human lives. He refuses to sit by and allow Y Kira to kill innocent businessmen, insisting on arresting the entire group because he correctly believes that Kira is one of those 7 individuals and that it would stop Kira's massacre. I'll explain that he thinks discovering how Kira's power works and Kira's true identity are the most important things in this investigation, but Soichiro's stalwart sense of duty wouldn't allow him to stand idly by and allow more deaths if he could prevent it. Non-Kira Light has his father's moral compass, so even he ends up arguing against Ryuzaki's insistence that arresting the group would be fruitless and only hurt the investigation. L is actually so aggravated by this mindset that he decides to abandon the task force because it's just easier to work without them. I mean, I get it, but... Part of this could be him saying, let's see how far they get on their own and remind them why they need me so they stop getting so argumentative, but it seems like he just knows that they'll end up getting in disagreements like this often, so he attempts to avoid them completely. Which is reasonable. Can we just take a moment to imagine if the SBK told Nier they had to arrest Mikami immediately when they found out he was going to kill 1 page of people every day because they just couldn't let people die? They would have ruined Nier's ultimately successful plan to defeat Kira. You can clearly tell how frustrating L finds this. This moment demonstrates the growing rift between L and the rest of the task force, as a man who used to translate the moral argument for L's investigative tactics eventually ends up forcing L to work alone again because his strategies are too morally dubious. Am I the only one who thinks it's heartbreaking to see non-Kira Light Yagami practically genuinely being the perfect son that Soichiro wants him to be, and then seeing Kira, the true face of Light Yagami, being Soichiro's literal worst nightmare? Like, this is the last thing he wanted for his kid. Even if you agree with Kira, you have to admit, he's an unfortunate son. After L's death, there's no talk of Light being Kira in the task force. With Light and Soichiro themselves heading the investigation, it'd be impossible, especially after seeing the stress that the chief endured when Light was a suspect. After Soichiro gets the Shinigami eyes, he only lives for a few hours before his lifespan ends. When you combine this information with him admitting to having suicidal thoughts after handing over the most dangerous weapon ever observed by humans to the criminals who kidnapped his daughter, you have to conclude that he was likely going to end his own life no matter what. Instead, he died smiling.
Light, you really aren't Kira. I'm so glad.
In Soichiro's absence, the suspicion that Light could be Kira makes a comeback. Aizawa is the character that L butts heads with the most. He's passionate about catching Kira, of course, but he doesn't always see eye to eye with Ryuzaki, and acts as his most vocal critic in the group. While Matsuda opposed L through his friendship with Light and sympathy through Kira, and Chief Yagami opposed L through his fatherly devotion to Light, Aizawa just doesn't like the guy. Aizawa is skeptical but lacks insight on the level of L, so it's easy for Light to avoid his suspicion, and for him to mistakenly point it at L most of the time. When Y Kira dismantles police resistance against Kira, the task force is made to choose between their careers and the Kira case. Chief Yagami doesn't hesitate in his dedication to the task force, and neither does Matsuda or Mogi. However, Aizawa has his reservations. He's been skeptical about L from the beginning, and his best friend left the task force because he didn't want to work with L either. He also has a family to provide for. L picks up on his hesitation and decides to test his resolve by pressuring him to choose, insisting that he must give one up. As Aizawa agonizes over the decision, Watsuri reveals the fun that L was choosing to keep secret. Simply the fact that L would test him like this enrages Aizawa, and he decides to return to his job as a police officer. It's clear that he regrets not being able to pursue Kira with everyone else, as he, cries about it in front of his wife and daughter. Fortunately, his best friend Ide hasn't been doing nothing, and the two of them continue going after Kira off-screen, and provide police support for L's operation to catch Y Kira. After diverging from the task force's path, he rejoins the team with his resolve reinforced, and as usual, he gets right back to interfering with L's investigation by insisting that L end all surveillance over Light and Misa when the 13-day rule is discovered. Aizawa didn't quite get along with L, but it's not as though he was particularly close to Light either. Aizawa wanted to believe in him because he was Chief Yagami's son, but he was also willing to entertain the possibility that Light could be Kira. However, because of their antagonistic relationship, one could argue that he hurt L's investigation more than he helped it. The opposite can certainly be said for Nier. Aizawa realizes that if Light really is Kira, he could have helped prevent L's and the Chief's deaths by helping L investigate Light. Instead, he stood in L's way, and Kira killed him. With no one standing in Light's way, he even led his father to his death. If Light really is Kira, Aizawa has a responsibility to stop him, and if he isn't, then investigating Kira really doesn't have any repercussions. He makes the choice he should have made back then. Aizawa, going back to old style, decides he has to meet Nier in person before he could trust him, and once he does, he agrees to completely cooperate with him. In the past, Aizawa has put his pride before his drive to catch Kira. He chose not to work alongside a man he disliked. But now, his conviction is strong enough that even being scolded by this sassy child isn't enough to deter him from doing what's right to stop Kira.
Mr. Aizawa, I'm going to be blunt with you. You and the rest of the task force are already out of the picture.
I've always hated Ryuzaki. I hate him and his way of doing things!
Don't you die on me, you idiot!
All I want you to do is keep an eye on him as you've been doing.
Eventually, after accepting Nier's request for assistance in his investigation of the second L, Aizawa actually swings chops in the task force. He just decides to put Light and Misa under surveillance again. He's clearly become an authority figure in the task force in the Chief's absence. While Light had been lamenting about how easy it was to fool his peers in the task force after L's death, Aizawa revives a tense suspicion in the group as he and Mogi agree to investigate Light, while Matsuda and Ide mostly sit on the sidelines. Aizawa doesn't begrudge them for this, of course, but he does get frustrated when he feels like he's in the lion's den and they're discussing the gossip to which Light has been drawing their attention. Of course, that might have nothing to do with stress.
Would you cut it out with all this dating, kissing, and Misa talk already?
Light, of course, being Kira, does pretty easily evade most of their investigation tactics by anticipating their actions, but Aizawa was making up for losing conviction in the Kira case in the past, and he won't let up his suspicion for the sake of willful ignorance. At this point in the series, Light is fighting against three different forces: Nier's threatening insight, Mello's dangerous unpredictability, and Aizawa's uncomfortable scrutiny. Light knows that Nier already fully suspects he's Kira, so he isn't concerned about Aizawa's surveillance. But when Aizawa discovers proof that Light was sneaking messages to Takada, he confirms that Light is Kira. Light was more concerned with his plan to bait the SPK, but he underestimated the task force's value, as well as the threat that Nier and Mello represent. When the time comes and Light's proven to be Kira, Aizawa is the first member of the task force to try to arrest him. All it took was the task force going along with Nier, and Mello throwing him off, and Kira fell right into their trap. Like the rest of the task force, Aizawa didn't want Light to be Kira, but he realizes that he can't let his emotions rule his investigation. The other members of the task force certainly contributed to the case as well. Ukida's death revealed the second Kira's ability to kill with just a face, which became instrumental in catching why Kira. Ide's strong sense of professional camaraderie allowed him to build an anti-Kira movement within a fightless NPA, which made it easy for L to mobilize the Japanese police against Kira when necessary. And Mogi's loyalty and willingness to discreetly investigate by any means necessary quickly made him L's favorite task force member, and he allowed L to learn the identity of the second Kira through his surveillance. Not a single one of them slouched in this fight, but there's unfortunately only so much screen time to go around. Kira made the task force the primary target of his manipulation from the beginning, and it consistently worked. They alienated L and often got in his way. Without them working side by side with L, who knows how much more he would have tried to get away with. Kira wouldn't have won without them, but they learned from their mistake, and they didn't make it twice. While the task force may be partially responsible for L's death, they also did their part to avenge him. They didn't escape unscathed, but in the end, they held on to their principles and did their job as policemen. They got Kira, even without L. Hey guys, it's your boy Zero. This video was supposed to go up on July 1st, and if it does, that's entirely because Hoodie's a god. I didn't finish the script until like the 29th because I'm a piece of shit, so if it is up on the 1st, it's because Hoodie's been burning that midnight oil, working his butt off to get this video out on time. If you'd like to show your appreciation or just like the video, consider heading over to patreon.com/KatoYT and joining the ranks of Wadzanai Mufunde, Hunter x Hunter 2011 Dick Writing Association, Calliope, Dojee, Paige Mulder aka Duchess Celestia, Gage Lambert, and DannyDaDonkey. $1 equals one nice job, Hoodie.